After 10 years of a great service for Manchester City as a club, one of the, I should say, best midfielders the world have seen, in the name of Kevin De Bruyne, is going to be leaving Manchester City. In this video, we're just going to discuss one thing. Where does Kevin De Bruyne rank in terms of midfield best, like the best of midfielders that we've ever seen? Of course, my name is Bryune.
My name is Enock.
And let's do this. Let's not forget that Enock is a die-hard Manchester City fan, and he might be biased in this one, but we have the facts ready. So, first of all, what makes a complete midfielder?
I think when you talk about completeness, we look at what he does on the pitch.
Of course, yes.
Yeah, we look at his defensive aspect. We look at his offensive aspect.
Yes.
But then again, it all depends with how the coach sets up his team.
True.
Yeah, and also the era that we are playing in. Because you can say the pre-2010s, the type of midfielders that were playing there, it's much more difficult, much more different with the modern playmakers, what they do.
That's true. And aside from what you've mentioned, we also have other attributes that make a midfielder like be termed as complete. And we are speaking of that because we know KDB is one of the most complete midfielders that we've seen in this era, and that's why we want to see where he ranks amongst the best of them. And in terms of technique, tick. Vision, tick. Creativity, tick. Passing, tick. But you want to see how his overall attributes are compared to best midfielders we've ever seen. We can start with the statistics and how his attributes have helped him be one of the most influential midfielders. So, I think, to me, if I were to rank him, he's one of the best in Man City's history, let's say, as a player, right?
One of the best, really?
Yeah, one of the best.
No,
because
he's our best player.
He's the best player Manchester City has ever seen.
Yes.
Okay, no disrespect, but it doesn't seem like a very good title for you guys. A guy who just played for 10 years for you guys. Anyway, it's still fine. But where would you rank him in the EPL, according to you?
According to me, amongst midfielders?
Yes.
KDB is number one.
Wow. What makes you think KDB is number one midfielder in the Premier League?
In the Premier League?
Or in the history of Premier League?
But I think, maybe before I answer that, I think when you talk about maybe midfielders, I think that question doesn't do much justice to the defensive side of midfielders, because they're usually more or less underrated.
That's true. But let's look at his position. Let's look at his position. Because if you look at it, in most cases, it is his position that people tend to focus on most of the time.
Yeah,
and that is where you'll hear, hey, he's the greatest midfielder of all time. And we tend to neglect the central defensive midfielders.
Yeah.
Let's look at his position then. So, why do you think he is the best midfielder in history of the Premier League?
Of the Premier League. One, because as I had said, in this era of football, we look at the modern playmakers. KDB came at a time when the 4-4-2 was much in play, and it was actually it was dying. So when he rose up the ranks from Genk, he was more or less his central attacking midfield role there wasn't space for him. So he was much more deployed to the wings. So it's more or less like a creative wing in a sense, from creative midfielder wing, if there's such kind of word. Yeah, from the wings. So I think what I'm trying to say is his versatility, and it's not about him playing in all positions, not being a jack of all trades and a master of none, but despite of where he has been deployed across the years, be it his time at Genk, when he came at maybe Chelsea, there was a lot of too much players, too much started players there. Wolfsburg, playing at a central attacking midfielder now, but focusing on the Premier League, when Pellegrini came, we had David Silva, we had Yaya, we had Fernandinho, we had Fernando, and as I said, going back to his Genk days, he was more or less deployed as the winger.
Does that make you the best in history?
No, it doesn't.
I want to know what makes him the best in history.
It doesn't. I'm trying to give you guys, I think,
an overview
of
his position, overall play,
overview
and versatility that he offers.
Of how KDB rose up the ranks, and why, as I'd say, City fans are more astute, or rather have a special place for him, and I believe also maybe football fans.
Now,
so His versatile position, and not just his versatility, the impact that has come from where he has played, and across the years.
Now, what makes him the best midfielder in history of the Premier League?
Winning titles. He has been the key figure in all our title wins. I'd say, 90% of all our title wins. And I know people say, like, despite we've been having a star-studded teams, but having that ability to rise, or rather to be a beacon of hope amongst all the started players actually is more or less of a kind of a unique thing.
But if we're speaking about titles, I think there's players who have more, especially in the midfield position, who have more titles than KDB.
True.
So why is he the best if we have Paul Scholes, who has 11 titles?
Yeah, we have Paul Scholes, but we have Paul Scholes, but Paul Scholes was more or less of a deploying playmaker, right?
Not really. He actually switched from the deploying kind of playmaker to a more attacking role at Manchester United, and vice versa. He was kind of a balanced kind of midfielder. So we can still put him in the same conversation because he can play as a CDM, he can play as a CM, and he can play as a CAM. So what makes you think KDB is better than Paul Scholes?
I test the numbers, bro. They speak for
what are the numbers? Bring the numbers.
I test the numbers. Speak for themselves. How many goals has Paul Scholes? Okay, let's look at their best seasons. As a United fan, which is Paul Scholes' best season statistically?
I think he has goal contributions of around 20 goals.
20 goals.
And assists, in the Premier League. I'm speaking about the Premier League.
Or the Premier League.
Yes, because we're talking of the best in the Premier League.
20 goals.
And assists.
Goals and goal contributions.
Yes, goal contributions.
As we speak, KDB has a record of 20 assists in a single season, tied with Thierry Henry, which I believe he was robbed 1 assist. It should have been 21. And I think that, I'm not sure if that was the season where he scored 13 league goals, I believe. And also, he's still tied with 15 league goals, Premier League goals, I think with Odegaard.
With Odegaard.
In the 2021 season.
Yeah, I think in terms of goal contributions, he might be a bit ahead of Paul Scholes. But we also have other midfielders who have more goal contributions than KDB. We have Frank Lampard, we have Steven Gerrard, who have been producing a number of goals season in, season out in that midfield in the same position. Why do you think he is the best in history? Give me another attribute or another statistics that makes you think KDB is the best in history as midfield position is concerned.
Going back to what you said, in the offensive what they said, offensive position rather. Lampard has a good record. Actually, I think he's the top scoring midfielder in the Premier League at the moment, with I think 177 league goals.
He took
which is actually a good record. And but if you look at assists, which I think KDB is way ahead. Which it's okay. It's a matter of what your strong suit is. I think for Lampard was more or less of scoring goals, but for KDB was more or less of assisting. But in terms of other completeness, as you had said, KDB dictates tempo better than
all the other players.
Yeah, than Frank Lampard. And when I look at all the Premier League players that you midfield that you highlighted, I think it's more or less for me it's usually between KDB and Gerrard. But what edges me most towards KDB is the impact that KDB has had. He's the only midfielder, as we speak, who has won the PFA nomination twice, with the likes of, I think, Ronaldo, Bale, I think Salah is the other one, and Michael, the only midfielder who has won the Best Player award twice. He still has more playmaking awards. And he still has. I spoke about his records in the league and for City. And I will look at that City team, the Centurion team, whereby I think was one of the best teams in Premier League as witnessed. He was the main man there. When you go back to the treble winning team, which besides you guys, it's also us. KDB was still the main man there. When you go to the four Premier League titles in a row, KDB has been the main man. That's why you'll have the likes of Jurgen Klopp saying KDB is warming and the whole country is shaking. That is what has come to.
Being fair, I think let me assume I'm a neutral fan here. I think KDB is one of the best in the history, but we can't just give him that accolade because, as we mentioned, we've seen in other attributes, we have players who have more in terms of, let's say, Paul Scholes has more titles, Frank Lampard has more goals. So it's not fair to say or to cement it like he's the greatest in history of the Premier League as a midfielder.
Let me ask you a question.
He is in the top 5, but...
Let me ask you a question. When you look at, when you talk about the modern playmakers, who maybe are some of the key maybe names that come to you maybe across the years, and what is maybe that there maybe a unique attribute that comes with
I think, as you mentioned, it depends with the setup of the team. And the core attacking of Manchester City was always KDB. It's like Bruno right now, and that's why people were comparing KDB with Bruno
not
season
people,
by season.
Man United fans. People.
Actually, everyone, because of the statistics. It's because of how the teams are built. And for if I'm speaking with for these other midfielders like Paul Scholes and Frank Lampard, they had their roles in the team, which was not as free role as KDB, and that's why you would see that their statistics or overall play or the overall impact to the team was not as KDB. So I'm not taking anything away from KDB, but as for me, I think he is not the great. Okay, he's arguably one of the best in the history of the Premier League. Now, I think it's also fair enough if we're ranking him amongst the best in the Premier League to try and see how or what he has against the other midfielders in the world, like let's say the greatest midfielders ever. So, and I think in this case, you need to win a bit more. You need to have individual accolades that gives you a chance to be compared to the best. And I don't think, for me, I'll start, I don't think KDB can be even amongst the top 5 in history. I don't know about you.
Top 5?
History of midfielders. Actually, in the world of football.
It depends. I'd say it depends with what type of midfielders maybe you grew up watching as well, and also the type of midfielders that actually phases you. Because maybe pre-2010s, as I'd said, we had midfielders who were actually astute to much more of dribbling. You'd see the likes of Iniesta, Zidane, Xavi. It was more or less dribbling to just find that open space. But as the game evolved, and this is the fact that actually I love about KDB, when there was no home for the number 10 role, we saw the likes of Ozil phasing out. We saw the likes of
James Rodriguez
phasing out. We saw the likes of Mata phasing out, and we saw like this guy has always. He's not the only one. We had like David Silva, we had others, but he's not the only one. But this guy has evolved as the game demanded more. Pep came in, introduced the free 8s role, and KDB excelled. We saw KDB as a false 9. We saw KDB, as I said, doing it across the wings. We even saw KDB when Roberto Martinez actually went a step further and played him as a deep lying playmaker. Remember the 2010 World Cup, and there was a lot of criticism saying that they're not getting the best out of him and not playing so much in the final third. And he excelled in each position. So it's as I said, maybe for me, I can say maybe if I'm to choose a midfielder,
do you think he's the best midfielder in the history of football?
At the moment, no. I'd say I don't know. I'd say it's more of an opinionated matter. It depends on a person. Maybe there's a person who grew up maybe idolizing Zidane and seeing and probably I think not much of this new generation maybe watched much of Zidane because he retired maybe 2006. So they watch maybe glimpses of it. So maybe it's KDB. But what I like about KDB, he's more or less he's in that starter, in that tier 1. When you're that tier 1 of midfielders with Iniesta, Jesus, that's where I'd also place my boy in the...
I think entirely it's because maybe you are also a Manchester City fan. But when you come to facts, we have midfielders who've won the Ballon d'Or. We have midfielders who've won the World Cup. We have midfielders who've dragged their international teams to glory. And KDB has not ticked those boxes. So I think for me, he could be in the top 10 of the best midfielders I have ever seen. Because I've been watching football since...
Wouldn't that be judging him harshly when you talk about Ballon d'Or? We have a lot of players who haven't won the Ballon d'Or. Like, for example, when I say, do you believe Rodri is better than Busquets?
At the moment, no.
At the moment, no.
Yep.
But when I put in the Ballon d'Or factor, it's more subjective.
I mentioned all these things because they came in as one. Ballon d'Or, dragging your national team to a World Cup or a World Cup final. And that's why I think if someone asked me to actually name the top 5 midfielders that I've ever watched in the position where KDB is playing, like centrally going forward, I don't know, how would you go? Would you name me your top 5 midfielders that you ever watched?
My top 5 midfielders?
Yes, in
no
in
particular
KDB's
order.
position.
In no
KDB's
particular order.
position. It could be in any order.
I think I'd go with Iniesta. Iniesta and Xavi. I think they are more or less of a unit when we look at them.
When you mention Xavi, you have to mention Iniesta.
Iniesta,
yes.
And we'll still go with KDB as well. I think but it's also say Zizou, because Zizou, much has to be said about Zizou, Zidane, and it will be a crime not mentioning him.
Yep.
And another player, I think. Not at the moment.
Those are the only midfielders
I'd
that
stick
come
with
in
those
mind.
at the moment.
I think we have Zidane, we have Iniesta, we have Kaka, and then we have these other midfielders where we can put KDB, Paul Scholes, and that is just my opinion. So if you think KDB is the best in history or in the Premier League as well, let us know in the comment section. So that is the end of this episode. My name is Bryune.
My name is Enock.
And see you in the next one.